This is the Red Alert. Civil defense information will be broadcast at 6:40.
West of the Rockies, you're on the air. Hello.
Y2K, how can we prepare?
Stop a few of their machines and radios. Throw them into darkness for a few hours.
We are fighting for our lives. My family must survive.
Over 5 years, 1,000 gallons of gas, air filtration, water filtration.
Coming at you from the frozen tundra that is East Central Alberta, Canada, streaming live on YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, Rumble, and Odyssey. Welcome back to the workshop where we create community, find freedom, promote preparedness, and share success. I'm Toolman Tim. Today is June the 9th, 2024, and this is episode 455 of Workshop Radio. I hope everyone out there is having a wonderful evening. What beautiful weather. I am on a short sojourn to Montana, a 2-day shopping trip with the wife and the in-laws. We're having a lot of fun. So let's forego any more niceties. And this evening, we have a dude who I just met in passing at Kentucky Sustainable Living. That's the big part of going to these events, is where we spend the time to get to know others and kind of network, and the whole works. So I reached out to Jeff, the everyday prepper, invited him to come on, and we're going to get him to share his story. So give us a moment. We'll bring him on. Hey, Jeff, how are you, brother?
Doing well, Tim. How are you?
Very, very good. And you are in the great state of Ohio. Is that right?
I am about 50 miles east of Columbus.
Nice. And how's the weather been there as of late?
Been very nice last few days. Tornado last week and a tornado last month. So we're exciting times here.
You yourself have been untouched for the most part?
So except tornado last month, it did go through our backyard and took out my father-in-law's barn next door, and then took out some trees on our place.
I don't know. There was one in Michigan just recently too. It just seems to be a bit of an active season, or an active year for it, doesn't it?
Definitely. And it's we tied with the one that hit the small town about 3 miles from us last week. That tied the record for the year at 62. And I'm sure we're going to end up beating that now.
Wow. Let's go back. I want to chat about that a little bit here in a minute, but let's start with who Jeff is, who the everyday prepper is, where you grew up. One of our favorite things here on the workshop is to dig a little deep and find out maybe what your first job was way back in the day. So let's start there with you, Jeff.
Okay. Well, I'll tell you what, boy, I'm thinking back. My first job, I think my first job was in a trailer sales place and putting trailer hitches on and stuff like that.
Did you ever walk and nail your knee into one of them?
Oh, definitely. All the time. I hate those things.
It's always funny what happens to somebody else, isn't it?
It's not even funny when I see somebody else do it anymore. It just hurts me. I felt that pain too many times. As soon as I see somebody do it, it's like the pain comes back.
Oh, it's miserable, I tell you. So did you grow up in the Ohio area?
I did. I was born and raised in the Cleveland area for the most part. My dad did some work overseas, working for a company that built steel mills when I was small. Then we came back to Ohio, and been here most of my life, except for when I was in the military. Then I got around to a lot of different places, and then came back here when I retired.
So how did you go from, installing trailer hitches to the military to self-proclaimed everyday prepper at this point?
Well, it's funny because as we have reunions and I get together with some of my old military friends, we'll be sitting around a campfire, and inevitably the conversation always turns to prepping. All my old military friends, for the most part, are into preparedness of some type or another. So it seems to be a military thing. Especially I was a security specialist in the United States Air Force, and all those folks, I think, just because of the process and the things we went through, we feel the need to always be ready for whatever may come our way.
I like that. It wouldn't be a disingenuous thing to say, to see that there's a lot of, former service people in the prepping field. And does that come from, I don't know, kind of having it beaten into your head, or like trained into you, or does it also come from maybe seeing, the harder side of humanity? What do you think about that?
Combination of things. Harder side of humanity, definitely. If you've ever worked a disaster site or an area of disasters devastated, you see how quickly the tide can turn with people. The best people, when you let them go hungry for a few days, will do some terrible things. So we're always concerned about that. But I think one thing with the military, you're always prepared for everything. But then there are times, been on deployments where we kind of got caught short, and somebody wasn't thinking ahead enough, and we ended up short on supplies or whatever. So I think that really puts you in the mindset of always looking ahead to not what you're going to need today, but what you're going to need tomorrow, next week, and next month.
What do you do? I mean, you can go into specifics or not, it doesn't matter with that kind of thing, but what do you do when you're deployed or, on a mission like that? Because it's not like you can run to your local Walmart or your local Cabela's to pick up what you need. What do you do at that point to get by?
You have to be resourceful. And
what does that mean?
Trade it, acquire it one way or another. Okay. And won't go into the methods of acquiring things, but you got to do what you got to do. And, if we ever run into a situation where we get into a SHTF situation, people are going to have to be ready to do that.
That's fair. Absolutely. I was in the line of all places today at a drive-through waiting to get a drink, and looked like the gentleman in front of me. He former airborne, looked like a paratrooper of some sort because he had the decals, and it said "Embrace the suck" next to it. And I've heard that from a lot of ex-military friends. And what does that mean to you, Jeff?
It means, no matter what the situation is, and you can be in some really bad situations, it doesn't do yourself any good to get down about it. There's always going to be tomorrow, and you just gotta keep your chin up and get through it. And I look back now that there was times in the military we ran into things, thought, man, am I ever going to make it through this? And you do. And I think embracing the suck is, if you're in a sucky situation, just wrap your arms around it, get through it, do whatever you have to do. And it's, so many people will get down and talk themselves down when they get in a bad situation. That does you no good at all.
I like that. Yeah. I've always tried to take that mantra with my kids too. It's going to be a shitty situation no matter which way you handle it. So I guess the only thing you get control over is whether you embrace the suck or not, isn't it?
Yep. Yeah, I love that expression, because that I think that could help so many people out if they think about that and then live it. I
love it. So where did the moniker the Everyday Prepper come from?
Well, it's been probably 10, 11, 12 years now. I started thinking about that. And my wife and I had gone to a lot of prepping events, and it was all new to her. She's a nurse and no military background. And so she had no idea what prepping was about. And it took her a while to really catch on, but we went to these events. She enjoyed doing that. She enjoyed going to the classes and enjoyed meeting people. And as we did that, I started noticing that, there was just a lot of areas being missed by the people out there. Because, everybody likes to talk about guns and freeze-dried food and ammo. Let's get that. But I started looking at the things that were missed, because, if you're in a bad situation like that, yeah, your stored food's going to last you for a while, but what do you do after that? You've got to be prepared to grow your own food, or you're not going to survive. And I hear people say, well, I got some packs of seeds from Walmart, and I got a garden hoe, and, if anything ever happens, we'll just grow our own food. And folks, it just doesn't work like that. If you're going to plan on feeding yourself like that, you better get started and start working on it. Find out what your ground will grow. And the first thing you're going to find out is that a Walmart hoe is not gonna do the job. That's why I started selling some high quality DeWitt hoes from the Netherlands. those things last forever. They have sharp blades on them, and they're long handled, 6-foot handles, so you can stand straight up while you're using them. And, you know, people need to think ahead and work. And when they find out what they have doesn't work, they need to find something else before they get into a bad situation.
I have broken many a Walmart tool over the years, and my wife claims she decided to call things that break easy, that she says they're not Tim proof, and she's not wrong. I have broken many a cheap handled Walmart. Yeah. So can you, I caught part of it. You said it was from the Netherlands. Is there a certain brand that you like?
Yeah. DEWIT.
Okay.
And
you said you sell them?
Yeah, I do.
How do people buy those from you so that I?
Well,
so I
normally I just sell those at events because the shipping is outrageous. But there is a place that ships them and has great deals on them, and that's Earth Tools BCS down in Kentucky.
Okay.
Gentleman by the name of Joel owns that. Great guy, full of information, and he's got the best tool collection I've seen online any place.
You are a man after my own heart. It's pretty rare that I get somebody on who wants to talk about high quality tools. So I like that. Do you have any other recommendations of things that it's funny that, okay, I'll back up a little bit. I got sent the other day, you know, when you do this sort of thing, you're quite often reached out to from companies who are like, hey, we'd love you to talk about our product, you know, for payment. And this one happened to be one of those like seed vaults in a can. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but the corporate stuff they sent, it just rubbed me the wrong way. And I said, no, thank you, because it was one of those things that I felt, you know, it could just kind of sit there. And again, if not used properly or not used at all, you're not going to know how to do it. If you wait to open your seed vault until the SH has TF'd, then you're in rough shape, you know?
Yeah.
So what are some of the other, other tools that you kind of recommend over the years? Because I always love getting good recommendations from you.
Well, see, now I've watched a couple of your shows before, and I know that you like the power tools and the cordless tools. The stuff I'm into is the old tools, the hand tools, bit braces, auger bits, hand drills. I like hand saws, both crosscut and rip. I like the big crosscut saws, the 2-man crosscut saws. Because stuff like that. Unless, you know, I've met so many people who said, you know, I got a cordless drill. If anything happens, I'm going to be set. Okay, how are you going to charge it?
Right.
Oh, I've been thinking about getting a little solar panel. Okay, thinking about it isn't going to do you any good if something happens before you get it.
That's right. I just picked up a bit and brace, really nice set at a yard sale. I've been doing some prepping yard sailing the last few weekends, and I was really pleased with this one. I've been wanting to, because I love of course, you know me, I'm a cordless tool fiend, and I'm great. I love the idea, but if in a long-term scenario, you know, more than a few months, you might have a heck of a time getting power. And even if you do, the batteries might run out eventually. So I do like hand tools, especially well-built things like that. And I love, the old two-person saws. I think you would get a workout. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, and you know, the thing about those is I've bought a lot of those, and I get them really cheap, but they're rusty. They need cleaned up. They might need a new handle. But once I started getting into those and learn how they're supposed to be sharpened and how you're supposed to have them set, I started looking at these things as I buy them and started checking them. And the majority of them have never even been set up and been sharpened correctly. So that's probably why they ended up in the back of the barn getting rusty. Because the majority of them I get, you're going to have a really hard time cutting wood because it's just not going to work.
Were they just brand new from the store and they just never sharpened them, or do you think they dulled them up, or what happened?
I think a lot of people didn't know that when you get those things, they're not set up properly. They need to be set. And I think a lot of people don't know that or didn't know how to do it. They thought they could grab it and go, and it just didn't work. And then some of them sharpen them incorrectly. They'll only sharpen the teeth on them, and they won't sharpen the center of the raker and then peen it down, because if your raker's higher than your teeth, you're going to have a tough time.
Yes, sir. So where does one go about learning how to sharpen those teeth. And when you said set those teeth, is that like the old timers would set the teeth on a handsaw, so they would offset one another, that type of thing?
Yeah, and you need to change the set depending on what type of wood you're cutting. If you've got a soft type wood, you're going to want the teeth set out a little bit farther. And there's also different types of saws depending on whether you're going to be cutting hardwood or cutting something soft like pine. And the big thing determines that. You'll see the trough in between the teeth, or the teeth in the raker. And you'll get, if you have some that are the teeth are really extended and you've got a big trough in there, that's for softwood, because you're going to be going through the wood more quickly and you need to carry more out of the kerf.
So bit and brace, and for those who don't know what a bit and brace is, it's basically a hand drill. The old timer, like you see the Amish, well, you picture the Amish, the old timers using the crank handle. And we talk about, push and pull saws. What are some other kind of off-grid tools that you've picked up over the years that you like to talk about?
Some of the simplest things, because people not only don't they think about the basic hand tools, they don't think about, what are they going to be missing that they might need. One of the neatest tools that I find, and I have a hard time getting them, a lot of times they need some work, but they're so worth the money, is a clamp-on bench-mounted hand crank grinder. Because if you think about it, if you're in a scenario where you don't have your electric grinder to use and you're having to fabricate stuff or sharpen things, one of those, man, it could just be a godsend.
I don't think I've ever run into one of those in a yard sale. I got to look for one of them. So are they like, I'm trying to think. So just like with a single, do they have gears in them or anything? Or are they just a single speed? Or
no, most of them will have gears in them. And it'll have the frame and the clamp with the screw on the bottom to clamp it on the table. Some of them are permanent mount, but most of them just have the hand screw to tighten it down on the table. And they'll have the crank handle and the wheel, and then they'll have a little tool. Most of them will have a little tool rest. A lot of times those are missing. And make it along with the tool over the years, but those things are just fabulous. And a lot of people look at them and don't even know what they are.
I don't know if I would. And I sold tools for a living, but that kind of stuff was outside of my purview. I got to look for one of them now. You got me. I'm always looking for interesting things. I like that. You mentioned rehandling some of those old push-pull saws, or whatever you want to call them. Do you have much experience with replacing broken handles in tools? Yeah,
I've done a fair amount. I wouldn't call myself an expert by any means. I've learned by my mistakes, and that's another thing. Other tools that I push, I do a class on old tools. A lot of these events, spoke shaves and draw knives. Because people, I'll ask people if everybody has all the wood replacement handles they need for their garden tools and any other tools. And I usually just get the dumbfounded look like, we don't have any spare handles. Then you get in a situation where your life depends on these things. You better have the ability to fashion something close that's going to work. And a draw knife and a spoke shave, especially a curved spoke shave, those are just fantastic. They'll speed up the handle making process so much. And if you have to fabricate something else, they'll really help out.
So if I got this right, draw knife is the long kind of blade with two handles that you pull toward yourself. Is that right?
Yep.
And a spoke shave, I'm a little off on that. What is a spoke shave?
Spoke shave will have two handles also, but it'll usually have an iron frame. And the handles, you'll have the main part that holds the blade, and the handles kind of come up, and the center part looks similar to a plane, and the blade looks like a plane. And basically you can just grab onto that and pull, and you can use it. You can get a lot finer cuts with smaller cuts than you do with a draw knife. And the curved one is just great because if you're trying to round something off like a handle, you've got the curve in it, and it just makes it a lot easier.
So what do you look for? Species of wood, grain of wood, that kind of thing. If, say, you didn't stash away a bunch of, rainy day handles and you needed some, what do you look for in the species, the grain, that kind of thing to make your own handle?
You know, you always want nice straight grain and as clear as possible. As far as the species, you know, there's a lot of things you can use. It just depends on what's available in your area. One of the best was ash, but I know here on our property we had a ton of ash trees that were killed by emerald ash borers, so that's out. But you know, hickory, I'd even consider oak if you could find a good piece of oak, straight grain, no knots, anything like. But you know, when it comes right down to it, it's going to be whatever you have available and you can fashion, because you know, if you get a softer wood, might not last as long, but it's going to be a lot easier for you to fashion a handle of some type.
Fair enough. And if you're looking for a draw knife or a spoke shave, what kind of place? Are there anybody that make new ones that are worth buying, or are you better off to go to like estate sales and that sort of thing?
There are some companies that make quality, and there's a lot of junk out there too. Mm-hmm. I tell people, you know, if there is a new quality version of an old tool, I try to get access to it so I can carry that too. But most of the stuff that I find that I end up selling, I'm getting at auctions, I'm getting at yard sales and stuff like that. And that's where you get the best deals. Although I've noticed there's been times when I go out and teach a class, and in my classes, I'll tell people what to look for and where to get tools. They don't want to buy them for me, they can go out and take their chances at an auction or yard sale. And I've noticed that an online auction service I used, I did a class in the area here in Ohio, and all of a sudden, a lot of the stuff that I usually buy and usually get cheap, people were bidding it up really high. So I don't know if that was some of my students or what. And if it was, more power to them.
You know, I have noticed the secondary or tertiary market for a lot of things have gone a little out of hand the last while. And one thing you'll note, at least I've noticed, is it used to be you could get some really good deals at thrift stores. Mm-hmm. And almost all of them now either think they're an eBay expert or the guys that are flipping stuff have drove the price up really high. And I have no problem with the free market. I'm cool with that. It's just, it's a pain in the butt when you go to, when you used to be able to buy, like, let's say a cast iron frying pan for $2 to $5 at the Goodwill. And now they have it behind glass and it's $60. It hurts. You're like, it's tough. I got a question here from Rachel in the audience. She wants to know, what about black locust for tool handles? Are you familiar with that at all?
Oh yeah, black locust is great. They use it for fence posts. It's very rot resistant. Although one thing about black locust, it can be it's not necessarily straight grain, depending on what section of the tree you're getting, but it is a very tough wood and a very durable wood. And if you have some of that and you can fashion a handle out of it, I think that would be great.
What about buying replacement handles today as opposed to fashioning them yourselves down the road? Any good areas for that?
That's a smart way to do it. There's some handle companies I don't know about in Canada, United States. House Handle out in Missouri, man, they have just got a ton of handles and they're very reasonable. And there are very few handles that you can't find online with them.
Okay. House handles?
House Handle, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, when I grew up, we were talking off air there, and I grew up on the East Coast in Nova Scotia, and we had an Indian chief there, native chief, sorry, that would he hand fashioned tons of handles for us, all made out of ash, and they were, people would drive for hours to come and get them. And just wonderful. If you can, I guess I'll throw in my 2 cents. If you can find a local person who fashions handles as well, you can always, I suppose, support them. But I like hearing good recommendations for sure.
Yeah, and that's that's sort of a dying art too. There used to be, I can remember when I was a lot younger, there was a lot of people that did that. Not a lot, there's a decent amount. You didn't have to look real far to find one. And now it's they're very few and far between.
I mean, it's that way. We in my town, so I was born in 81, and I have vague recollections of there being a blacksmith where the Dairy Queen is now. So, and it was gone by the time I was 4 or 5. And that was it. That was the last one. I don't know how far you would have to travel from my hometown now to find a blacksmith if you wanted one. Machinists and welders maybe can do some of that work, but yeah, it's a lot of it, So what? Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
And we were at Kentucky Sustainable Living there back in March, and Doug Slack, who was the blacksmith there. I've known Doug for a couple of years now. Man, he just does great work, and he's now the resident blacksmith at Fort Boonesboro down in Kentucky.
That is cool.
Yeah. But if you get connected with a good blacksmith, that's definitely a relationship you want to build and maintain.
Absolutely. I've got 2 buddies that do a lot of that kind of work, and we've gone. One of them, my good buddy Chris Dixon, he's part of this community. Him and I have taken a couple of knife making courses together, and we met another guy who is, one of the only blacksmiths around, and he hired another girl straight out of college as a blacksmith, but they do mostly knife forging classes now, but they can do all the old fashioned blacksmithing as well. And yeah, you're right. It's worth it for sure. So what, maybe to parlay out of tools, what about everyday, the idea of being an everyday prepper? So what does that mean? So say somebody comes to you, Jeff, and they're like, I'm scared about insert whatever, for me, let's go back to 1999, 25 years ago, we were getting ready for Y2K. That's hard to believe it's been 25 years, but that was what I don't know if that's what brought me to it, but that's what made me cognizant of it. So somebody comes to you today and they're nervous of whatever it happens to be. Where do you tell them to start with prepping?
Tell them to start small, be consistent. That's when I was growing up, my parents both came through the Depression. And they picked up habits back then, or the habits were passed down to them. And I remember when my mom would come home from the grocery store, the bags would go on the table, and as she pulled stuff out, occasionally something would get slid to the back of the table, and that was stuff that was going to go in the basement. Every time she shopped, there was stuff that went down in the basement. We weren't preppers by any means back then, but we probably could have survived several months between what was in the basement, what was in the freezer. And that used to be a way of life for folks.
Absolutely it was. And they just called that normal. It wasn't even something they thought about, I suppose. It was just, hey, let's buy a little, let's put a little extra up. And so what does that mean today? Is that like, does that mean go out and buy 1,200 pounds of, raw wheat, or where does the average Joe start?
Start at wherever you get groceries.
Okay.
Just get a few extra things every time you go shopping and build up a little bit more. If you feel the need, and I suggest that, majority of people don't have enough to get by 3 days. Get enough to start to get by 3 days, then go for a week, then go for 2 weeks, then go for a month, and just slowly build up. People get themselves so wound up because they think, oh, I've got to get enough to last for a year right now. And it's not going to happen. You're going to go broke doing it. And there's no sense in getting that wound up about things because, with all the things they have said from Y2K to date, all the things they said was going to happen, how many have actually happened?
Right. Pretty close to that. As far as having and for those in the audio only, I held up a big goose egg there for you. So yeah, you're right. And that's, I get people come to me, there was a lady who came to me at prepper camp last year in September, and she was what we would call a baby prepper. She was brand new. And I almost felt like I had to talk her off a ledge.
Yeah.
I don't know. I pick on poor Alex Jones all the time. And I don't know if it was Alex Jones or Canadian Prepper or whoever it happened to be, but somebody got her riled up. She'd been watching a lot of doom and gloom prepper porn, for lack of a better term. And she said, I have to get my husband convinced that, I forget what her big concern was, and I'm not trying to play light of it, but she was very much convinced that something bad was going to happen immediately. And I said, yeah, but you can't ruin your life thinking about that. You have to start slow. And I find, I guess for me, one of my big things has been to, people come at prepping from fear, and I want them to turn it into passion or purpose, looking after their family, as opposed to, okay, you come at it, you're scared of an EMP. Okay, well, wherever you stand on that, that's a whole hell of a lot less likely than having a 3-day power outage or losing your job or getting sick. What are your thoughts on that?
Oh, definitely. I always tell people, I talk about probability versus impact. And when any kind of event you're considering, first thing you got to consider is the probability. And then marry that up with the impact. If you have something that's extremely low probability but very high impact, like an EMP,
right?
That's definitely something that you're going to want to have on the back burner. You're going to want to prepare for. But the tornadoes that came through our backyard last week or last month, that's a lot more probable. Economic downfall in this day and age is a lot more probable. People, not going to say who, messing with our supply chain and our food supply, a lot more probable right now. So, probability versus impact, that's definitely the way you want to measure and decide how you're going to, what type of a timeline you're going to set for getting yourself prepared and the schedule you're going to make out for how you're going to do it.
So you mentioned, say financial collapse or financial in general, and there are people in the prepper sphere who are talking about this, but how important is it to be financially set, to be, to maybe not take a huge amount of debt, but is that one of your kind of pillars of preparedness, is being in a good financial position?
Being debt-free or as close to debt-free as possible is the best thing that you can do. That just puts you in a good position no matter what happens. And I get people that they're concerned, should I have a lot of money stashed away? Well, that's great. But if you do, you've got to have a plan to use it quickly, depending on the type of event. Because if the grid goes down, if the supply chains are going down, if you hold on to that money for a week, it's not going to be any good. You better get out there, buy what you need. And I heard you on one of your other shows talking about Franklin Horton and his Borrow World Series. That when they started off, they had a plan in place. His wife grabbed the money, took off. They went and got gas. They went and got propane. She knew what to get. And if you're going to try to keep some cash on hand and you get into the right situation, you got to be ready to do that. Don't hold on to it. And then you get the folks who say, you got to have gold. You got to have some gold stored up. And I had one guy that was great guy, loved him to death, but he was really harping on me getting into some gold. And I said, I think it's good to have some, but I don't really think it's going to do you a lot of good in the situations we're talking about. He said, well, if I have gold, I can get anything. I said, really? I said, what do you have? 1 ounce gold coins? He said, yeah. And I said, I got a lot of them. So, well, that's great. I said, okay, we have an EMP. Stores are closed. You can't get anything. I got a lot of food. What are you going to do? He said, well, I'm going to come. I'm going to be able to buy anything from you that I want. I said, cool. Well, what do you want? He said, well, how about a bucket of beans? I said, okay, that'll cost you one of your 1 ounce gold coins. He said, no, my gold's worth a lot more than that. It's not to me, it isn't. I can eat the beans. Right. I can't eat the gold. And the look on his face when reality set in.
And so there's so much to unpack there, but you're 100% right. Here's the other thing. And something I think about a lot, and I'm big into precious metals. I love, especially silver. I love silver. I don't think that people should invest in, don't buy gold and silver if you don't have your finances taken care of. Don't buy gold and silver if you don't have food taken care of.
Don't take out a loan to buy gold and silver.
Oh my God. Don't even get me started on anybody tells you to do that. You run away, run away. But here's the thing. If you've got a family at home with a kid who's hungry, do you really think that they're going to sell you a bucket of beans for all the gold in the world? No, they're not. Because why would, because that gold is not worth anything, at least in the short term. I don't, oh yeah, that's a tough one. And so another kind of aspect of that's one reason I really got into silver, was that it's very much, much smaller divisible quantities. Because, you're not going to flake off a little bit of gold to buy a bar of, or a loaf of bread, for instance. But something else, and I don't know if you've noticed this in your area, a lot of stores in my area are no longer taking $100 bills.
Mm-hmm.
So I used to, our kind of cash reserves would be in some $100 bills, because it's easy to store, easy to get from the bank machine. Well, I realized again, when we went through 2 years ago, we had a massive IT outage here in Canada, which meant our bank machines didn't work. And I was 5 hours away from home with my parents at the time. And I had a couple $100 bills. Well, it got really hairy to break those $100 bills really quick. So we now keep 20s. Is it a thicker stack? Yes, but it's a little more practical, Yeah. So gold, silver, cash, they're all good. What other areas do you like to talk about when you're getting people into the babies of prepping?
I'd like to have them go into it open-minded, not just focus, like I mentioned earlier, the guns, the ammo, the freeze-dried food. They need to look at everything. And I always tell them, when you're deciding what you're going to buy and what's important, use the rules of three. Because, a lot of people will buy things backwards. I got to have food. I got to have food. Okay. You got water?
Right.
Okay. That's going to get you quicker than food is. And people who have medical conditions, make sure that you're getting prescription medications, build up whatever you need, or find an alternative that's going to work in an emergency situation. And look at all those things. And, you tell people, you can live 3 minutes without oxygen. And right away they think, okay, well, it's not like I'm going to drown. So, okay, think about the things that can deprive you of oxygen, like a lead pill, a bullet, somebody coming after you. That's security has got to be your number one. So you've got to make sure, that to me, that falls under the first and the three in the rules of three. If you're gonna make sure that you can breathe, you're going to have to be able to protect yourself from whatever you come up against.
That's a really neat way of looking at it that I don't think I've quite heard put that way before, Jeff, because you're right. The first rule of three is quite often overlooked, the oxygen thing, because we figure, well, like you said, you're not going to drown, or, you might treat it if you build an underground bunker, you might think of the need to have, fresh air exchange or something. But beyond that, I like that. That's really good. That's worth the price of admission right there, folks. So, you know what? I want to back up. I forgot you'd mentioned about Franklin Horton and talking about how they had a plan to spend that money quick. And do you have, because I think everybody has to have their own trigger or their own, you know what I mean? Because you don't want to be the guy who cashed out their RRSPs or whatever right before Y2K and then went and lived in the woods with their Y2K survival kits and tuna that's now been expired, For us, I remember the day, I was keeping an eye on COVID. And what I like maybe about being a prepper is that hopefully you have most of your ducks in a row. And if you're like any other prepper, sometimes more of your ducks are in a row than others. But you have a plan. And I remember being at Home Depot and I heard on the news again about COVID. And I thought, man, it's been enough people that I know of are talking about it. They were starting to talk about it going to North America. And that was the day that Becky and I decided, okay, we're shoring up the rest of our over-the-counter medicines. We're buying a few more masks and some sanitizer, a few more things. We basically topped up our preps. So do you have any trigger events or plans on when you would pull the trigger to start spending on something like that? What would you be looking for?
That's an interesting question. my wife and I are always looking at what's going on. And I always try to think I'm a chess player. I got to be looking multiple moves ahead to see what's going on. In the things I see concerning me now, it's like we talked about the food and the food supply. And we live out in the country. We have chickens, we have rabbits, we've got goats, we've got a couple ponies. But now we're getting to the point where whether it's food shortage or quality of food that's available on the market, we're going to get into some chickens, we're going to get into some beef, we're going to get some pasture pigs. Ooh. Make sure we have those on hand and start being more self-sufficient. We already do pretty good on the gardening and what we raise there. But, just looking ahead, that's one of my biggest concerns. And I know people are really concerned about the financial world, but there's, you're kind of stuck within your means, what you're going to be able to do there. The best thing you can do, start trying to be debt free and start trying to get a little bit saved. Don't go overboard on it. And when you're building stuff up like that, think about how the world's going to be if something does happen, and you're going to have to be able to barter. And you want to make sure that you have items that are going to be in demand so you can do some bartering.
Well, funny you bring that up. What items do you view, or what do you store that you think or you feel that would be a good barter item in kind of a down scenario?
One of the biggest things is going to be ammunition, because I know tons of people that have guns out the wazoo, and then you start asking them, how much ammo do you have for that? Oh, I got 23 rounds. Okay, 23 rounds for an AR-15 is just going to get you in trouble if anything ever happens. So ammo is going to be one of those things. Medical supplies, because a lot of people don't think about them. A lot of people aren't prepared. And you can get these little kits that if you break a tooth, filling falls out, you can put this in, it'll last for a while. People never get those. They don't think about situations like that. They don't think about personal protective equipment. Leather, good quality leather gloves, sunglasses, some goggles, things like that, because usually in day to day, I'm one of those guys that, is my buddy Andy from Andy's Little Homestead says, safety third. And you don't think about things like that. But if you're in a situation where an infection can take you out because you can't get antibiotics for it, you better be more concerned about your personal protective equipment and take care of yourself.
I like that. Yeah, I try to be a big proponent of it. I have lived by that moniker of safety third many times in my life and paid the price for it. But I guess we all do. So you said good quality leather gloves. Do you have any that you like, or certain sources for getting those?
I don't really have a source that's my go-to. I usually kind of shop around where I can lay hands on them and make sure they have a good fit, and just check out the stitching, see if they're good quality. But that's something that's heavy enough that briars aren't going to go through it, that it'll stop a fairly decent splinter. Because if you get one of those things and it gets infected and you can't properly take care of it, that's a showstopper right there.
Miserable. Yeah.
Big Joe Prepper did all these preps and the splinter takes them out.
Could you imagine? I know. Well, a little larger event of that, but you hear about guys quite often, off the grid, and they have a chainsaw accident. They don't have a tourniquet nearby, or they, and yeah, that's it, right? I mean, What about antibiotics? Do you have any? Sorry about that. Never had. What about antibiotics? Do you ever have? Do you have any sources for getting antibiotics, or anything that you think would be a good thing for that?
There are sources out there. We're still sort of concerned about making sure we have antibiotics for our fish.
Fair, yeah. That's still a thing.
Yeah, you got to take care of your fish, so make sure you got some fish antibiotics for them. And a lot of them are still available. They've been trying to shut that down, but.
So we just give a little anecdote about that. So that avenue has been shut down for many a year in Canada. It hasn't been even a thing. But a couple of years ago, I got reached out to by, I can't remember the company, but Jace Case, the Jace Case company. And so they sent me a full course of, I guess, 5 or 6 different types of antibiotics. And we hadn't, we will typically go to the doctor still to get antibiotics, because why use our stash or our supply if I can, well, our daughter had, some, an infection, and we knew she needed antibiotics, and it wasn't completely serious, but we also knew that we really didn't want to go and spend 8 to 10 hours at the emergency room waiting to see a doctor because we couldn't get her a short-term appointment. So we put her on a round of 5 days of antibiotics and cleared it right up. So that kind of thing it's nice to have a good stash. It's nice, but you also, yes. What about education? What about first aid books or courses, anything like that? Because if you don't know what to do with the antibiotics, you'd be hooped as well, right?
Yeah. And people, when they're buying medical supplies, and I've seen people out at events who sell this stuff. People are buying stuff that they don't have the knowledge to use, which is just ridiculous to me. You see vendors out there selling esophageal airways. How many people there know how to use an esophageal airway? Right. Buy stuff that you need, stuff you know how to use, and like you're talking about, get the training. So many people I run into haven't even taken a basic first aid course. They can't do CPR, and there are so many good classes out there that are available if you just look a little bit. I know one gentleman, he wasn't at the event we were at in March, but he was down at Kentucky Sustainable Living in October. Jake of Drum.
Jake Drum? Yep.
Jake's just fantastic, and he's got some classes. He's got a storefront down there in Johnson City, Tennessee, where he's doing classes now. And he's an incredible instructor, and he's got some great classes. And, invest a couple $100, take a class from somebody like that, get your knowledge where it needs to be.
A good buddy of mine was at the last one, Chuck Peoples, and he does Homestead Medical. Mm-hmm. He does a live tissue course that I really want to take.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I can tell you more about it. He doesn't hide the details, but it's an incredible course that I would love to take. But I think within the prepper sphere, again, we're really good at buying stuff, but we're not so good at taking the courses and learning the skills. What do you think about that?
Oh, that's definitely true. I'm guilty of that. There are things that I get with the intention of learning how to use it correctly, and it always gets, once you got it, you push the training aside and keep telling yourself you're going to do it. But then there's always something else that's more prevalent, more important, and you end up putting it aside. But that's definitely, if you're going to get something, make sure you find training. Find somebody who can mentor you and show you how to use it.
What about one other area I'd like to touch on too, and then I'd like to talk about the event that you got planned here coming up in a few minutes too. But what about backup power? What are your thoughts on that, and do you have preferences, that sort of thing?
Well, consider what you really need backup power for. I think the ideal thing is being set up so you can live without power. Okay. Because, ideally, especially if it's something long-term, that's probably what we'd be faced with. For the smaller things, I've got a Jackery 1500. If we lose power, I can run Starlink and run my computers, and I can stay working because I work from home. So that can keep you going. I can run freezers with that. Especially if I can get it hooked up to the solar panels. That's a great temporary fix. People, are real big on generators. Generators are good for short-term events. It's funny how many people will say, I got to run generator 3 days. I'm out of fuel, and it's costing me a fortune. Why are you running it all the time? Run it when you need it. It's going to last longer that way. But, look for look for something that's sustainable and something that can last long term. And the best thing to do is be prepared to live without it.
I like that. I like that a lot, actually. And I don't disagree. I'm a big proponent of solar. I catch a lot of flack from my community because I'm not anti-electric vehicle either. I really like some of the, I haven't tested them a whole lot yet, but I really like some of the electric bikes that have come out as well.
Mm-hmm.
Because again, like you said, most people are going to get 3, I probably have enough fuel that I could sip my generator along for 4 to 6 weeks if I needed to. But what do I do after 6 weeks, right? I have a small solar system, that's what I really like about solar. And I'm glad you mentioned it too, is that it's a bit of a infinite energy glitch. I get it. I know shit can go sideways. They can break. Your batteries will die eventually, but in a lot of ways, it's a lot better than, like you said, a generator. Hey.
Mm-hmm.
So what about fuel storage? Do you do much of that at all? Or do you stay mostly away from that because you talked about learning to live without power?
Don't do a whole lot. I would like to up our capacity. I would like to be able to store several hundred gallons of gas, several hundred gallons of diesel. And I think we'll be moving towards that eventually, but still, you look at, if you get something like an EMP, mm-hmm. What if are you getting the ignition modules and stuff for all the things you plan on using this stuff for, so you can replace those? And if you're, say, a chainsaw, if you got the replacement module for it, do you have the instructions on how to put that in? You better have those printed off if you've never done it before, and keep those with the module. There's just so many things that, there is no short answer, because once you start down the rabbit hole, it just gets deeper and deeper. And like I said before, people never think that far out.
So you and I, we met, and again, I talked about the importance of kind of face-to-face get-togethers. We met only in passing. I wanted to make a little more time at KSL. So I'm going to guess that you're a big fan of having folks get together, because you've shared with me for a minute at the last event that you were getting ready to plan an event yourself. So mm-hmm. How did that come about? What's it called? When's it going to be? Tell me about it, because I like hearing about that stuff.
Sure. I've had several people ask me over the last couple of years, when are you going to do an event? And I always said, I'm not going to do an event. That's too much. But I've been to a lot of events, and I see the great things they do, and I see areas that could be improved upon, or I have a totally new idea how something could be handled that might improve things. And, finally I just got to the point I was thinking, man, maybe I want to do this, but I could never come up with a location. And when I was at KSL back in, was last October, middle of the night, it's like 2:00 in the morning, I woke up and the location came to me, and it's in Millersburg in Holmes County, Ohio, the heart of Amish country. They've got a fantastic fairgrounds there. And what better location in the heart of Amish country to learn about homesteading and prepping? And that's when the Heartland Self-Reliance Conference came to be, and I started working towards that. And now it's a thing. It's a real thing. It's going to be May 2nd through the 4th next year, and I want to bring homesteading and preparedness together, because I've noticed, for so many years, each side took their own path, and we're not crossing over. The preppers, you do your thing; homesteaders, you do your thing. But really, we're so similar with different knowledge bases that could be useful to each other, that I think it's important, especially the way things are changing, and we're not so concerned about EMPs, but we are food supply. I think it's important for preppers and homesteaders to get together, share their knowledge, do a little cross training, basically, because if they're going to make it through the kind of events that we're good man, Ed. I know Andy is awesome, but Yeah, I think it's necessary for us to cross that, and I want to do that at the Heartland Self-Reliance Conference. Another thing I want to do is have a line of life skills classes there, because so many people, shop class is gone, home ec is gone, and so many people are not learning some of the basic things they will need if they ever have to be self-reliant and be able to live off of what they can do. There's people who don't know how to read a tape measure, use a handsaw, sharpen an axe. Another thing that came to me is, how many kids do you know nowadays know how to use a slingshot?
Well, that's true.
And slingshot, that's, if you're proficient with a slingshot, you can eat with it, you can protect yourself with it. There's so many things you can do, but there's just so many little things in there that I think we can find people do short classes on, that people can stop in and pick up that skill or the basic knowledge they need for it. And I think within the 3-day period, we can offer things that will end up having people walking out of there with a lot better idea where they need to be if things go bad in the future.
So you need to meet Jeff. One of my self-proclaimed superpowers is introducing folks to one another. I love to connect, and but Jay just took it upon himself, which is even better. So this is B-Man Jay, and he is out of East Tennessee, and he's a beekeeper by trade. But anyway, he could pass for the most interesting man in the world. So he said he'd like to come. Yeah. So I'll make the introduction after the show. I'll send an introductory email to both of you as well. But
cool.
I love that. I did the preparedness course, or not even a course. It's just a presentation where I stand and talk basically for an hour, and I love it, and people love it. But I have been leaning toward. So, okay, my girls graduate high school in 4 more years. So I'll be doing much longer road trips, if that's hard to believe, then. And so I want to start putting together a, 4 to 8 hour course on what I call preparedness, the art of home maintenance when help isn't around the corner, doing all the little stuff that people don't necessarily. And I think I'm really passionate about people learning that kind of stuff too, because I don't know how else do they learn it? Like you said, there's nothing. Not a lot of schools are doing home ec, that kind of stuff. So what kind of stuff do you envision teaching at this event?
Well, some of the things I just mentioned, I'd like to find somebody who can show folks how to use some of the basic hand tools. I'd love to be able to do it, but I think I'm going to be kind of busy. But how to use a handsaw, how to use a hand drill. People out there don't know how to drive a nail. There's in the old tools classes I do, I usually start off, I'll hold up a claw hammer and say, how many of you have a claw hammer? And 95% of the class will raise their hands and they're proud they got a claw hammer. And how many of you have a selection of nails to use that hammer on? Mm-hmm. And then you go down and you've got maybe 5% or 10%, and a lot of people looking pretty sheepish. They don't have the knowledge. And, driving a deck screw with a hammer is a difficult thing. Everybody's got deck screws. Everybody's got drywall screws. But if you don't have something to use it with.
So very true. I love that. Yeah, you're right. I'm working on a project this summer, actually, that we're rearranging the backyard of my home. And one of the plans is, I talk about the importance for folks to become their own hardware store, and that doesn't mean having $20,000 worth of stuff, but it does mean having, like you said, an assortment of nails, an assortment of screws, an assortment of nuts and bolts, and not buying a bunch of crap you don't need, but buying the stuff you actually will use. So I'm a huge proponent of that. So in Ohio, are there any other events in that area, or are you guys going to really be kind of filling a niche there? Because I don't remember being told about a whole lot of events in the Ohio area.
There's been in the southern part of the state, down in Vinton County, there is Old School Survival Boot Camp that just changed their name. And, they've got a great event down there. It's a 3-day event. Also, I've taught classes down there and I've ended down there. And they've got a lot going for them. But what I'm an hour and a half to 2 hours north of them. And I'm looking to draw from, you've got Cleveland, Akron, Canton, Columbus, Pittsburgh. We're sort of centered more or less between those urban areas. Got a lot of suburban areas, and you got a lot of country around them. And, especially on the homesteading side, people nowadays, a lot of people are wanting to do something. They think, I got to go out and buy 10 acres to do it. No, there's things you can do in your own backyard to help you get by. And I've met some people over the years that small backyard, and they're growing enough to feed the family back there. And
Absolutely.
And I want to have some classes available to kind of get those people in that mindset that, I can start it now and I can do it right here. I don't have to move. And I think that would be really beneficial to people to get going with what you got and just make it work.
And I think if I read it in the email, I don't think the website isn't quite up yet. Is that right?
The website should be going about a week from today. So
do you have a URL for it or what it's going to be?
The Heartland Self-RelianceConference.com.
Okay. And there was something else that you mentioned in your email too that I hadn't heard of. You're going to have to tell me the name of it, but it was a movement or a group that you do with veterans and dogs. Is that right? Yeah,
the Dogs Inc. They were formerly Southeastern Guide Dogs. They're based in Palmetto, Florida, and they breed and train guide dogs, service dogs, and then they have some dogs that for one reason or another aren't quite appropriate for that, but are just great dogs. And they will give them to Gold Star families who've lost somebody in war to, help them during their time of loss and their time of need to have some companionship there. But there's great organization. And this is something, I told you, this was a takeaway from Kentucky Sustainable Living, because they have their fundraiser for an organization there. And I thought, man, that is really great. I think that really, I think that should be a part of every event like this. And Dogs Inc. As a matter of fact, I got into Dogs Inc. for my cigar club, Facebook cigar club. But what we live for, the whole reason we exist, is to raise money for Dogs Inc. now and help get veterans the service dogs that can change their life and bring them back. They've got over 500 dogs deployed with veterans now, and they have not lost a single one to suicide, which is just awesome. If we can bring down that 22 a day, and not only is this going to be a deal about fundraising, it's going to be a deal about educating people, because if people know, so many people know somebody who has that problem, who's got PTSD, who might be getting close to the edge. Reach out to Dogs Inc. and see if they're a good fit for a dog, because I've met veterans who have the dogs, and it's just amazing how it can change their life and bring them back closer to normal.
That is really cool, Jeff. I like hearing that, man. Bit random note, but I might have to pick your brain a little bit on cigars, because it's something that I've only gotten into the last year or so, and I only know just enough to be dangerous. So
that's good though.
That's how I was with bourbon a few years ago. So if you don't mind, I'll definitely reach out to you on that too. But Jay has he just said he loves his PTSD dog. And
oh man, awesome, Jay.
Jay's an awesome dude. The first time I met him was at prepper camp 2 years ago. We sat down and did an in-person interview, and he had his dog with him. And Jay is you guys will get along good for sure.
Cool.
And this is Mike. He was there as well. Snail Creek Homestead. He said, "I'm a food plant nursery vendor at KSL. Your wife bought some plants from me. Thank you."
He's got awesome plants.
He sure does. Mike's been on the show a couple of times. He's a great dude, man. I tell you. So, Jeff, how do people follow up with you if they want to, pick your brain, throw money at you, ask questions, that kind of thing, sir?
That's I'm easy to reach. My email address is jeff@theeverydayprepper.com. And that's the best way to get a hold of me. And I'm always available to folks, and I tell people, I'll meet people at my booth at these events, and they'll ask questions, and I'll give them my card and say, if you have any more questions, they'll say, well, I didn't even buy anything from you. Okay, that's not important. If I can help you, and I'm not the smartest guy in the world, but I know some of the smartest people in the world. So that's if I can't answer it, I can probably find somebody who can.
Well, I appreciate you, brother. And I'd love to have you back another time if you're up for it. It'd be great.
That would be fantastic. Love to do it, Tim.
Thank you, sir. If you want to hang in the background for just a second, I'll close up the show here and I'll be right back with you.
All right. Thank you.
Well, guys, I hope you enjoyed that. I try my damnedest to find, I mean, we have our regulars who have been back multiple times, and I love our regulars, but I also try to find new folks that come at prepping with a little different voice, somebody that maybe you haven't heard on, my show or, some of my friends' shows in the last while. So Jeff was great. I loved having him on here. If you're in the Ohio area, check out his festival, because I'm telling you, there is an insatiable appetite for great preparedness and homesteading events. So make sure you can support him if you can. I won't promise yet, but if we can make it work, we'll make it work. I would love to head out that way next year. It would be absolutely awesome. So reach out to Jeff, folks. And I appreciate you. Thanks for dropping in on a nice Sunday evening. We had a great crowd in here, lots of community interaction. So give Jeff some support, guys. And as always, stay happy, stay healthy, and have a great week.